Well, it's another lovely time for us to be together right here on Viewpoint on Atlantic TV. And you do know, anytime we tend to kickstart things on the show today, we always go straight to the dailies. And that will be no different from what we're doing today. And today we have 6 papers to look at. We have the Punch, the Vanguard, as much as we have the Guardian, the Daily Sun, the Daily Trust. I'll be wrapping things up with the Nation. But you do know I always enjoy starting with the Punch, and let's see what the Punch has as a major one on this front page. On the Punch this morning, the lead story reads, 2027, Tinubu Atiku will be where ex-governors for campaign DG roles. And riders to follow, Uzodinma Amakura, Tambuwa among frontrunners for presidential campaign DGs. And the INEC opens 2027 presidential campaign August 19. Obi may pick campaign DG from the Southwest. And APC, ADC, NDC to unveil presidential campaign teams come next week. But anyway, rather than wait, why not go grab a copy of the Punch and read it up on page 2. Storm over fake agency probe as Rep prepare final report. And you can get more of that report on page 28. Tinubu to review state police bill comes September the 3rd. And that story is making the rounds on page 29. Labour gives federal government August 11th ultimatum over wage award. And 7 have more of that details. And 30 years after Atlanta Gold have not been rewarded, says Joe Bumfrey. Well, anyway, sorry about that. But get more of that story up on page 30. The picture of the day for me, I'll take that of the Economic Summit. We're talking about the Delta State Economic Summit that was held yesterday. And we'll be looking at that critically later on Dialogue. But you can see all smiles. We can see no other but the executive governor of Delta State, His Excellency Right Honorable Sheriff Obodiwori, and the Vice President of the Federation, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, and the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Premium Trust Bank, Mr. Emmanuel F.A. Well, anyway, that happened yesterday. Well, all smiles indeed. But anyway, that's much we can take from the Punch. Let's quickly run to the Nation as we extra on the papers this lovely morning. And on the Nation this morning, the lead story reads, National Policing Bill gets 7-week action plan. We heard that the SGF himself said that yesterday, Femi Gbajabiamila. The writers to follow, working group opens portal for public input. It is Tinubu's most consequential reforms. Well, anyway, you can really admit to that. But I'll tell you to get that story up on page 2. Let's see if we see take some other lady ones still on the front page of the Nation. 2027, Makinde leads Onyeyola Fayemi on visit to Obasanjo. And why they visited him, I'll tell you to get more of it on page 31. NEC approves a $4.5 billion Gazelle 2 facility to refinance loan. It's also a screamer on the business part of page 2. We will secure victory, says Uzodinma. And we're still talking about the August 15 polls in Osun. Office of the Citizens in Arms of Muffers. Well, anyway, if you really want to know more of that, go grab a copy of The Nation, page 26, has more of that story. UAE deepens African ties with about $71 billion investment. Wow, that's a cherry one on page 2. And PDP state chairman Sikh Turaki orders persecution for impersonation and forgery. And full details, not the fake one, is on page 22. The picture of the day is the officially opening of Ayo Fayose Lodge. And that happened yesterday at Ado Ekiti. You can see the governor, other traditional rulers, and the man of the moment, Ayo Fayose, former governor of Ekiti State. But well, that's the much we can take from the Nation. Let's quickly run to the Guardian as we look at the papers all put together today. And on the Guardian this morning, the lead story reads, Federal government orders pass burden of economic growth stability to state governors. Oh, really? Well, anyway, page 6 has more of that story. And setting or Senate threatens sanction as CBN, NUPRC, NDDC orders Sean Committee. And you can get why they're really not happy with that on page 3. The 767 factories short, 335 orders in distress under Tinubu's watch. Sorry, I didn't say so. Atiku is alleging that on page 3. Nigerian orders lose $484 million to cyber attacks as Interpol warns of AI influence. And well, anyway, you can get that on page 5. Jam to go paperless at INA unveils 5-year transformation roadmap. And why that so? Well, a young mind and he's doing things differently on page 30. Federal government rallies public input on state police as report says death toll hits 5,091 in the second quarter of this year. Quite disturbing. But page 6 has more of that story. Well, talking about the elections, Oshun polls, I'm not under pressure but don't trust police, says Adeleke. Well, the back and forth is still on page 7. Falana demands probe of suspicious death once again cover-up. And why or what death he's talking about, I'll tell you to get that on page 29. Enugu church adoption shows no Nigerian is safe or be warned on page 29. Quite disturbing, and that happened just during the weekend. Showere reignites controversy over Tinubu's education status. It's a major one on page 5. But the picture of the day is that of former governor Ayo Fayose on the unveiling of his lodge. And like I said, that happened yesterday at Doikiti. And well, anyway, that's the much you can take from The Guardian. Let's quickly run to the Daily Sun. Sunny? Well, I don't know, but could be. And on the Daily Sun this morning, presidency set September 3rd for state police bill. Riders to follow begins consultation, invite Nigerians to shape policing, and AGF assures safeguards will prevent political abuse. Well, anyway, don't abuse that story, but get more on page 6. Oshun Goba, Uzodima declares poll must win for APC. Our beta delegate says Oyebaji, and you can get that on page 27. 2027, restore confidence in electoral process to avert voters' apathy. Onaikon urges federal government, says bad elections breed bad governance and misery. Well, anyway, page 26 have more of that details. Governor Oboriwori unveils $100 million fund for de-risking of investments in Delta, as Shetima Hill states as investment friendly. And that page 2 has that story, but we'll be looking at it elaborately later on Dialogue. Catholic Bishop Hassan expresses concern over president's remark, Nigerians' democracy, says 2027 election must not fall below the 2015 benchmark. And you can understand that on page 26. Nigeria may pay less for petrol as oil prices tumble over Trump's newsstand on Iran. And we're just happy about that. We wish that will come, but get more of page 2. Fresh concerns of trail recruitment of Nigerian women into Russia Alaboga scheme. And why that is so? Well, page 5, I have more of it. But the picture of the day is what happened yesterday in Sabah. And we're talking about the Delta State Economic and Investment Summit 2026. And you can see all those dignitaries from the governor to the vice president, to the WTO chair, and to the governor of Anambra State, as well as others. Well, anyway, all that happened just yesterday. Well, that's the much we can take from the Daily Sun. Daily Trust will be up next. And on Daily Trust, we paid $50 million to secure Kebbi governor's release, says family. Wow. Well, anyway, well, okay, just read that on page 5. 2027, Makinde, Fayemi, Onyola meet Obasanjo. Why that meeting happened? Page 10 has more of the details. Oshun, Adeleke seeks president intervention on killings. And quite disturbing. This is just a state election, and yet we're getting reports of persons being killed. Quite disturbing, you agree with me. But I'll just tell you to read up on page 10. Phantom Council, ICPC concludes probe, and more of that probe is up on page 6. Let's see if we take some other leading stories still on the front page of the Daily Trust. Trust you still with us. State police bill ready for Tinubu's review September 3rd is screamer on page 4 and 5. The picture of the day is that of residents on the street after a trailer conveying cattle overturned in Gombe Metropolis, Gombe State yesterday. Quite disturbing. You know, sometimes the roads might be good, but the drivers need a whole lot of caution. But anyway, that's how much we can take from Daily Trust. Let's run to the last paper for review, and that will definitely be the Vanguard. On the Vanguard this morning, the lead story reads, Nigerian quality of life took us to Tinubu. Sorry, I didn't go there, but Onaikon said so, and says we're done talking, tells president to govern better. And I'll tell you to get better, or rather more grip on that story on page 9. FCCPC seeks uniform consumer protection and states open electricity markets. And page 19 has more of that story. 2027 Nigerians, not Obasanjo, will decide election. ADC saying that on page 9. Economic Summit, Shetima Konjo-Iweala, Lumelu orders seek investment in Delta. Well, anyway, page 10 has more of what happened in Asaba yesterday. I pity Tinubu, sorry, not me, but more concern for Nigeria, says Hassan on page 49. Let's see if we take some other leading stories still on the front page of the Vanguard. PFIPC, allow me to testify. I'm being made a scapegoat. Sorry, not me, Adeyemi. 6 administrative clearance to appear before Reps panel. And more of that story is up on page 5. What Tinubu told me after a staff member died in my residence. Umahi is saying that on page 45. APC Adeleke clash over notorious criminals protection. Oyem Bamiji unveils 100 days agenda, target workers' welfare. And I'll tell you to get more of that story up on page 25. NEC approved refinancing of $3.3 billion Project Gazelle to optimize costs, unlock additional liquidity. And page 49 has more of that story. And well, anyway, let's see if we go to the Mr. and Mrs. column. You know, it's always nice to have a humor part of it. Well, anyway, funny enough, Mrs. will always have the first shot. She snatches husbands. I'm done with her. Mr. said, good standpoint. Mrs. replied, I hate her and she hates me. Mr. said, that's standoff. And Mrs. said, I know you won't support me. And Mr. said, that's stand alone. Well, anyway, well, okay. Anyway, well, Mrs. can stand. Well, but the picture of the day is that of the economic summit that happened yesterday in Asaba. We're still talking about the Delta State Economic Summit. And indeed, well, quite interesting. And we're hoping to see the outcome of that. So it won't just be like more public speeches and no actions to follow, but more action.